Today, I want to explore a bit more about the brain training game. Now, I've been playing this on and off for easily the last 10 years, and I've really noticed the benefits of playing the game. And it's kind of one of those where it's like you sort of take the pill, but you're not doing the research behind it. And I wanted to understand a bit more of the background of it. What exactly is fluid intelligence? What kind of experiments and stuff were done to discover the creation of this game? And why is it so good for me to especially be recommending it for so many people to try it on their own? So I'm currently on the brain training website, which is brainworkshop.sourceforge.net. Don't worry, I've got a link in the description so you can head to this yourself. I will also state that I'm not sponsored, I'm not affiliated or anything with the brain training game. It is, though, something that I absolutely love. Well, have a love-hate relationship with. But it is something that I do recommend people do if you have social anxiety because of the benefits that it just gives to you. But I'm going to read through the website and we're going to go through all of the pages. There are links that go to other sites as well, which it's been a while since I kind of had a look at them. So it'd be interesting to just see what other notes and explorations of topics there are within the brain training realm, and just see what else we can learn about the game. Because whenever I play the Duel and Back, I mean, I literally just play just the original, untouched, unedited version of the game. Whereas I know when I've explored the community, because there is a community, believe it or not, of people who are absolutely obsessed with playing the game and really bettering their brain training skills. But like, I'm aware that you can change like the letters, you can change like the color of the square, you can change the speed that everything kind of appears on the grid or what's heard when you're going through the grid. Yeah, I guess I'm kind of just curious to know a little bit more about it and just see what else is there available. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to read through the website. By all means, feel free to jump forward chapters, explore stuff on your own. Otherwise, feel free to put your phone aside, put your laptop or computer aside, do other things whilst hopefully listening to me read through the site and see what else we've got available. Brain Workshop is a free open source version of the Duel and Back brain training exercise. What if a simple mental exercise can improve your memory and intelligence? I really like that philosophical, rhetorical question there. In a 2008 study published in the PNAS Scientific Journal, shows that a memory task called Duel and Back may improve working memory, which is short-term memory, and fluid intelligence. These findings are important because fluid intelligence was previously thought to be unchangeable. Well, first of all, let's just see what it says here on the 2008 study. We know what. Let's actually read through it. Let's see how long this takes. Fluid intelligence refers to the ability to reason and to solve new problems independently of previously acquired knowledge. Fluid intelligence, or GF, which they've dubbed it, is critical for a wide variety of cognitive tasks, and it is considered one of the most important factors in learning. Moreover, fluid intelligence is closely related to professional and educational success, especially in complex or demanding environments. Although performance on tests of fluid intelligence can be improved through direct practice on the tests themselves, there is no evidence that training on any other regimen yields increased fluid intelligence in adults. Furthermore, there is a long history of research into cognitive training showing that although performance on trained tasks can increase dramatically, transfer of this learning to other tasks remain poor. Here we present evidence for the transfer from training on a demanding working memory task to measures of fluid intelligence. This transfer results even though the trained task is entirely different from the intelligent test itself. Furthermore, we demonstrate that the extent of gain in intelligence critically depends on the amount of training. The more training, the more improvement of fluid intelligence. That is, the training effect is dosage dependent. So it's interesting. So already what it's sort of stating there is that as long as you're constantly repetitively playing this game, you will see an improvement in results. And I've had people certainly leave comments on some videos saying like, how many rounds a day should you end up doing, which I did do a video on. And if I end up playing the game and then I stop for a while, how long is the results going to last for? And I've certainly found that, if I play the brain training game and then I stop, the benefits of it sort of maybe last maybe for an extra day or so until it sort of dwindles. And then I'm kind of back to thinking how I am before. So it really is like taking medication or daily multivitamins. And as long as you are doing it regularly, then that is where you will see the benefits and you do certainly notice an improvement. But if you stop doing it, then it's almost like your brain slowly sort of like weans down its logical and intellectual thinking, and then it kind of goes back to a very neutral state. So it's interesting to think that, as long as you are working your brain regularly, then that is where you see the benefits of it. And if you aren't doing anything useful with your brain, then that is actually where you are essentially becoming a bit more stupid, or a bit more, I will say stupid because it's not fair to say anything harsher than that. So thus, in contrast to many previous studies, we conclude that it is possible to improve fluid intelligence without practicing the testing tasks themselves, opening a wider range of applications. Fluid intelligence is a complex human ability that allows us to adapt our thinking to a new cognitive problem or situation. Fluid intelligence is critical for a wide variety of cognitive tasks, and it is considered one of the most important factors in learning. Moreover, fluid intelligence is closely related to professional and educational success, especially in complex and demanding environments. Okay, that's interesting because it makes me think, if I'd have played the brain training game when I was in school doing like my GCSEs or A levels, what kind of difference would that have made to me learning so much information and then applying it during exams? There is considerable agreement that fluid intelligence is robust against influences of education and socialization, so social anxiety, and it is commonly seen as having a strong hereditary component. Fluid intelligence can be compromised as seen in the effects of certain manipulations that threaten one's group membership, but if fluid intelligence can be improved by any means. In the domain of psychopharmacology, although there is a market for the so-called smart drugs, there is no study showing evidence for a drug-related increase in fluid intelligence in healthy adults, although there are certain psychomotor stimulants and D2 dopamine receptor agonists that have effects on isolated cognitive processes. So it's true that there are kind of like brain drugs that you can have that certainly help with your focus, but that doesn't necessarily increase your intellectualness. If that's a word, because if that's not a word, then that's kind of embarrassing that I've just used the word intellectual on a word that does not make sense. So beyond the psychopharmacology, there is a growing interest in whether computer and video games may increase IQ. But in contrast to suggestive advertisements, there is no empirical evidence that computer games enhance anything beyond task-specific performance and selective visual spatial attention, which in a way is true, because like even when I've played puzzle games, or games that have like a lot of things going on, especially if it's like button bashing, like with God of War, or you're trying to like solve something. What's a really good puzzle game? Okay, nothing's coming to mind, but I find like it tends to help more with like my reflexes and critical thinking of, a puzzle in that moment. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to help me with my social anxiety or being able to communicate with other people. In fact, I then find, and I'm sure maybe if you're a gamer yourself, you'll probably find that it's easy to talk about the topic of a game or something that you have an interest in with other people. But if it comes to like critical thinking or having discussions about things that are outside of maybe the social norm for you, then it certainly is a difficulty or a struggle, to talk to people, such as, for example, you might be really good at playing and talking about God of War, but if you were to go into a shop and ask questions about clothes because you don't know the fit or the color scheme that work for you and stuff, then you're going to actually struggle to necessarily communicate that to someone. You're going to maybe have social anxiety if you're not used to asking people those sorts of questions. But put you in a situation where you could talk to another computer gamer, then that's actually going to be really easy for you to do. Of course, one can easily increase performance in tests of fluid intelligence by simply practicing the tests themselves. However, it has been demonstrated that practice on these tests increases their novelty, and with that, the underlying fluid intelligence processes. So that the predictive value of the tests for the other tasks appears. These findings are compatible with a long history of research on cognitive training in psychological and educational sciences, showing that although performance on trained tasks can increase dramatically, transfer of this learning to other tasks or domains remains shockingly rare. Despite many failures to find transfer in any domain, the sheer importance of identifying tasks that can lead to improvement in other tasks recommends continued investigation of transfer effects. With respect to fluid intelligence, the issue is whether one can identify a task that shares many of the features and processes of fluid intelligence, but that is still different enough from the fluid intelligence tasks themselves to avoid mere practice effects. A recently proposed hypothesis by Halford et al. Might serve as a useful framework for the design of a transfer study in which one would like to improve fluid intelligence by means of working memory task. Their claim is that working memory and intelligence share a common capacity constraint. This capacity constraint can be expressed either by the number of items that can be held in working memory or by a number of interrelationships among elements in a reasoning task. The reason for a common capacity limitation is assumed to lie in the common demand for attention when temporary binding processes are taking place to form representations in reasoning tasks. Other authors came to the related conclusion, stated that fluid intelligence and working memory are primarily related through attention control processes. So basically just doing stuff that involves a lot of focus and sort of like multitasking within that, doing like simultaneous things, which is where you've then got the focus on the blue square that's moving around the grid, and you've then got the letter being said. So essentially it's kind of playing with two senses, and by playing with two senses, that is where you can start creating an improvement on working memory, because it's now trying to work on your short-term memory. Like, what can you recall in that moment? So it's a bit like if maybe you're walking down the street and you see a car going by, and then you notice what color the car is and maybe, what kind of brand the car is. And at the same time, maybe you might be hearing music playing either from the car or from somewhere nearby. And then you're kind of like paying your attention on these two things, as well as that's in a way kind of creating a connection as well. And that in a way is actually how memory is formed. So if then, let's say, a week later you hear that same song, that might remind you of when you were walking down the street and you noticed this red Ford car, driving along the road. So it's interesting how the combination of different senses is actually what then contributes to a memory. The underlying neural circuitries provide additional evidence for a shared variance between working memory and fluid intelligence, in that both seem to rely on similar neural networks. Most consistently located in lateral prefrontal and parietal cortices, Therefore, it seems plausible that the training of a certain neurocircuit might lead to transfer on other tasks that engage similar or at least overlapping neurocircuits. So interesting. So it's sort of suggesting then that certain parts of the brain, especially if it's the front, which does work on memory, that you are actually strengthening particular neuro pathways. And it doesn't mean then you're strengthening all the parts of your brain, but you are working on intensifying a part of the brain which is used quite predominantly. Although working memory capacity and fluid intelligence may share common variants, they are far from being isomorphic. That is, there are factors other than working memory capacity contributing to individual differences in fluid intelligence. Nevertheless, we propose that with a training intervention that strongly relies on binding processes and attentional control, it may be possible to produce transfer effects from a trained task to a reasoning task in which performance lies to a large extent on the same processes. There are indeed some studies showing that training on working memory with young healthy adults may lead to effects that go beyond a specific training effect. So it seems that there are some potential for transfer after training on working memory. To investigate whether training on working memory leads to transfer to fluid intelligence, we conducted 4 individual experiments, all using a newly developed training paradigm consisting of a very demanding working memory task, illustrated in Fig 1. Okay, so that's when they made the brain training game. In this task, participants saw 2 series of stimuli that were synchronously presented at a rate of 3 seconds per stimulus. One string of stimuli consisted of single letters, where the other consisted of individual spatial locations marked on a screen. The task was to decide for each string whether the current stimulus matched the other one was presented n item back in the series. So that's where then sometimes people are really good at being able to focus on something visually, but they don't always hear so great, or maybe they hear something really well and they've got the attention with their ears, but maybe they're not so great seeing stuff visually. The value of n varied from one block of trials to another, with adjustments made continuously for each participant based on performance. As performance improved, n incremented by 1 item. As it worsened, n decremented by 1 item. Thus, the task changed adaptively so that it always remained demanding, and this demand was tailored to individual participants. So basically, it's like on the brain training game, when you do well, you go up a level, and when you start struggling, you come back down. So it's then literally catering to the difficulty that your brain is going through with the challenge. This form of training engaged processes required for the management of 2 simultaneous tasks. It engaged executive processes required for each task, and it discouraged the development of task-specific strategies and the engagement of automatic processes because of the variation in n and because of the inclusion of 2 different classes of stimuli. Okay, and then that's just basically like a visual example of the brain training game. So yeah, visually you've got like the square on the grid, and then auditory wise or sound wise you've got like a letter said, and if something's in the same position of so many positions back, then you've got that correct. The aim of the training intervention was the investigation of the effects of training on the working memory task and its impact on fluid intelligence. We accomplished this investigation by pre-testing participants on a measure of fluid intelligence and then post-testing them on another form of this measure. Because we hypothesized that any alteration of the processing system would take some time to be effective, an important difference among the 4 experiments was the number of training sessions between pre and post tests, ranging from 8 to 19 sessions. To control the mere retest effects, the performance of the trained groups was compared with control groups who were also assessed on fluid intelligence, but who were not trained between these 2 testing sessions. Interesting. So the different tests that they had going on, or the different experiments, was to actually see how many rounds per day or frequency of sessions actually made a difference to improving someone's fluid intelligence. So the results, Analysis of the training functions revealed that all 4 training groups improved in their performance on the working memory tasks comparably. So basically, just by playing the game, no matter how much or little that the groups did, or we'll find out how many rounds they did get a result. They did get an improvement on their working memory. What interests us most, however, is the dramatic improvement on the test of fluid intelligence in trained groups. Although the gain in the control groups was also significant, presumably because of retest effects, I don't know what that means, the improvement in the groups that received the apparent benefit of training was substantially superior. So the improvement in the groups that received the apparent benefit of training was substantial. So basically the people who genuinely did play it a lot, they got the massive difference, which confirmed by the significant group test section interaction. Don't know what that means. There's a lot of like just random numbers. If maybe you're just listening to this, that they've just got in brackets. A subsequent analysis of the gain scores post-test minus pre-test as a function of training time over either 8, 12, 17 or 19 days showed that transfer to fluid intelligence varied as a function of training time. Analysis of covariance and COVA with the factor group trained versus control, the post-test scores as the dependent variable and the pre-test scores as the covariate revealed a trend for group differences after 12 days. Statistically significant group differences after 17 and after 19. Okay, so I think that's kind of showing that there was a much bigger improvement for people when they were basically continuously playing it. So obviously just compared to 12 days to 19 days, there was what looks like about 3 times improvement over what was there over 9 days. So basically it's suggesting that if you play this game longer, you'll start seeing dramatic jumps in your fluid intelligence. Post hoc analyses, Gabriel's procedure two-tailed for the training group revealed significant differences between the following groups: 8 versus 17 days, 8 versus 19 days, and 12 versus 19 days. There was a trend for a difference between 12 and 17 days. These analyses indicate that the gain in fluid intelligence was responsive to the dosage of training. Okay, so we've got a graph here. So at the bottom we've got the actual days itself. So the triangle was the one where they did it for 8 days. Okay. Which they got to... So after 8 days, people kind of got to 4 back. If they played it for 12 days, they got roughly about to 4.5, which means they may have sort of like dabbled on average getting to like 5, but it was sort of on 4. After 17 days, yeah, there was a lot of like fluctuating, going up and down, but they still sort of roughly played it and got around like 4.5. But when they played it for 19 days, they got the dramatic improvement. But they also found that where they had like a really, really intense improvement, essentially kind of like the day after, they were a little bit weaker. I can actually admit I've had experiences like that myself, where I've almost like, it's almost like you've pushed your brain so far, and then the next day, if you've gone into the gym and you've now done like a personal best on your deadlift, and then the next day you just can't go to the gym because like your back is kind of achy, a bit like me today actually. And so I can kind of get it that then, yeah, if you were to then go to the gym after you've had an intense day before, there's no way you're going to have that same level of intensity. You're going to be weaker. So you would have to do, or if you tried to push yourself, you just wouldn't get to that same intensity as you did the day before. So that kind of makes sense to me with that. I've definitely experienced that when I've played the brain training. So it's important to note that the gain in fluid intelligence is strictly training related and not due to pre-existing individual differences in intelligence or working memory. So, okay, so what might have also been a contributing variable in the situation is then having people who have all very different IQs and levels of intelligence, which is understandable, because if you've then maybe got someone who is incredibly smart as opposed to someone who's not so smart, or someone who's got a higher IQ than the other person, and they're both playing the brain training game, then there is certainly a factor there that the person who has a higher IQ might be better at the game than someone who has a lower IQ. But then that also isn't then contributing to the fact that maybe that person with lower IQ might have better focus and attention on something, as opposed to the one who might have a higher IQ. It might take them longer to learn stuff. So it's interesting that maybe there are a lot of contributing factors which can affect the learning speed and the overall improvement and the success of the levels of the dual and back game. And that, you know, the ultimate conclusion there is, as long as you are playing the game over a long period of time, essentially everyone does get to that same plateau. Everyone will get to level 4, everyone will get to level 5, and so on. It's just a matter of how quickly can someone adapt to these levels and play through them. So that's interesting. That is interesting. I'll kind of just sort of skip that bit because it's just throwing a load of numbers. Further, the gain in fluid intelligence was not dependent on the initial working memory capacity as assessed by pre-test performance in a digit span task or a reading span task. Note that reading span was not assessed in an 8-day group. Therefore, our cognitive training proved to be useful for all participants and had no adverse effects for participants with high initial working memory capacity. So again, everyone got to the same point. It was just a matter of the learning curve of playing the game. So additional analysis showed that there was training related transfer on the digit span task, group time session interaction. Okay, that means nothing. But not on the reading span task, in which both groups improved equally in the post-test session. However, the training time dependent gain in fluid intelligence remained intact after controlling for the gain in working memory capacity, as measured by a performance increase in both the digit span task and the reading span task. Furthermore, the training time dependent gain in fluid intelligence also remained intact after the controlling for the average NBAT level was reached in the last training session. So essentially it's kind of saying that what also made a difference was the amount of rounds that people did during each of the day sessions as well, that there was a much bigger improvement and a faster improvement if you did more rounds in a session. So it's kind of where, like, I've recommended to people at the minimum try and do 10 rounds, but if you want to really push yourself, try and do 20. And that I think we saw it earlier. That was also something that they suggested. In sum, these data indicate that the transfer effect on fluid intelligence scores goes beyond an increase in working memory capacity alone. We discuss this point in more detail below. Okay, I'll read just the one more bit. I'll just read the discussion bit, and then I'll let you read the rest on that, because the materials and methods I'm not too worried about. But this is really fascinating though, that ultimately anyone can play this game, and as long as you're willing to do as many rounds in a session as you possibly can, to really, really push your brain's capacity and working memory, then that is where you can really see the benefits of working intelligence or fluid intelligence in all sorts of daily scenarios. Okay, so let's just read what they've got for the discussion, and that's all I'll read back on this section, and then I'll go back to the Brain Workshop website. We set the stage for our observed transfer effect by establishing that there is an impressive learning curve for the training task in all 4 experiments, as expressed in comparable monotonically increasing training functions across all of the training intervals. These training results indicate that the participants were challenged and motivated to improve their performance even after training time as long as 4 weeks. Having established the training effect, we then documented the striking result of a training-related gain in fluid intelligence, a finding that has not been reported previously. How can such a transfer effect arise? Operationally, we believe that the gain in fluid intelligence emerges because of the inherent properties of the training task. The adaptive character of the training leads to continual engagement of executive processes while only minimally allowing the development of automatic processes and task-specific strategies. As such, it engages in G-related processes. Furthermore, the particular working memory task we used, dual and back task, engages multiple executive processes, including ones required to inhibit irrelevant items, one's required to monitor ongoing performance, one's required to manage 2 tasks simultaneously, and one's required to update representations in memory. In addition, it engages binding processes between the items, i.e. the squares in spatial positions and consonants, and their temporal context. Really interesting. So examining the transfer tasks in terms of the processes involved, there is evidence that it shares some important features with the training task, which might help to explain the transfer from the training tasks to the fluid intelligence measures. First of all, it has been argued that the strong relationship between working memory and fluid intelligence primarily results from the involvement of attentional control being essential for both skills. So you can improve your working memory, as essentially saying, by being able to just constantly engage it. By this account, one reason for having obtained transfer between working memory and measures of fluid intelligence is that our training procedure may have facilitated the ability to control attention. This ability would come about because of the constant updating of memory representations with the presentation of each new stimulus requires the engagement of mechanisms to shift attention. So it's a bit like if someone kind of like were to be clicking their fingers in front of you, and your eyes would be constantly engaged in looking at them, and then maybe they even say to you, right, you've got to count how many times I'm doing it. So that active working again on memory visually and through audio is that simultaneous result in what's improving your memory. This ability would come about because of the constant updating of memory representations with the representation. I read that. Also, our training task discourages the development of simple task-specific strategies that can proceed in the absence of controlled allocation of attention. Carpenter et al. Have proposed that the ability to abstract relations and to maintain a large set of possible goals in working memory accounts for individual preferences in tasks such as the Raven's Advanced Progressive Matrices test, and therefore in fluid intelligence. This ability to maintain multiple goals in working memory seems especially crucial in speeding fluid intelligence tasks because one can speed performance by maintaining more goals in mind at once to foster selection among representations. Therefore, after training working memory, participants should be able to come up with more correct solutions within the given time limit of our speeded versions of fluid intelligence tasks. However, our additional analysis show that there is more to transfer than mere improvement in working memory capacity, in the increase in fluid intelligence was not directly related to either pre-existing individual differences in working memory capacity or to the gain in working memory capacity as measured by simple or complex spans, or even by the specific training effect itself. Therefore, it seemed that the training-related gain on fluid intelligence goes beyond what sheer capacity measures, even if working memory capacity is relevant to both classes of tasks. Of course, tasks that measure fluid intelligence are picking up other cognitive skills as well, and perhaps the training is having an effect on these skills, even if measures of capacity are not sensitive to them. One example might be multiple task management skills. Our dual and back task requires the ability to manage two end back tasks simultaneously, and it might be that this skill is that is common to tasks that measure fluid intelligence. Our measures of working memory capacity, by contrast, index capacity only for simpler working memory tasks that are not so demanding of multiple task management skills. So essentially, it's saying that this game is really, really pushing your brain capacity, which is why it creates such a great result, as opposed to maybe if there was just general actions that you were doing in life that weren't creating such an intense level of focus and short-term memory working. So sheer working memory capacity alone may be an important component of measure of fluid intelligence, but beyond this capacity, there may be other skills not measured by simpler working memory tasks that are engaged by our training tasks and that train skills needed in measures of fluid intelligence. It may still be the case that training on the dual and back task promotes development of these non-capacity skills. A line of evidence consistent with the idea shows that individual differences in both working memory span and in end-back tasks are related to individual differences in fluid intelligence. The finding that the transfer to fluid intelligence remains even after taking the specific effect into account seems to be counterintuitive, especially because of the specific training effect that is also related to training time. The reason for this capacity might be that participants with a very high level of N at the end of the training period may have developed very specific strategies, which obviously boosts the MBAT performance. So it's a bit like with me, how I've kind of got my own way of remembering and recalling the positions and letters. And then that's where I've made like other tutorial videos to do that. But what works for me might not necessarily work for other people, but may prevent transfer because these strategies remain too task specific. The average MBAT level in the last session is therefore not critical to predicting a gain in fluid intelligence. Rather, it seems that working at the capacity limit promotes the transfer to fluid intelligence. So essentially it's saying, like, as long as you find your own method to playing the dual and back game and you're able to recall stuff and then move forward through the difficulty levels, then you are actually improving your fluid intelligence and your working memory. Of particular importance is the finding that pre-existing inter-individual differences in fluid intelligence as measured in the pre-test are not related to the training-related gain in fluid intelligence. This finding indicates that the effect of training is not restricted to participants within a certain range of cognitive abilities. Both inflow lowers fluid intelligence as well as high fluid intelligence participants profit from training similarly still. Still, although the interaction was not reliable, we remain cautious about this result because numerically, the low fluid intelligence participants showed somewhat larger gains than the high fluid intelligence participants. Of course, this result may be accounted for the regression to the mean, but it may also be that the training was truly greater benefit to those who had lower fluid intelligence participants, if not reliably so in our study. So kind of what I mentioned before, that about with the two IQs of someone with higher and lower, it's really how that person adopts it. But the person who maybe has a lower IQ or lower fluid intelligence is going to overall get the better result because they are improving so much more, perhaps, than maybe someone who already has a high capacity. So it's interesting. So again, you're kind of getting to a plateau. Everyone's going to get to that same point where they've got really good working memory, but it's a shorter journey for someone with already high fluid intelligence than it is for someone who has a shorter fluid intelligence, because they've got more of a journey to go through, and they're the ones who are essentially kind of playing catch up with the other group. So really interesting, really interesting with that. The dose responsive gain in fluid intelligence indicates that the training benefits is not a threshold phenomenon. The constraints of our experiments do not permit us to know how much longer we could have continued training before failing to realize any further gains. So when you kind of get like these diminishing returns where you're not getting any extra benefits from trying to do even more rounds in a session, or maybe you are hitting a plateau if you've played the game for like months upon months upon months on end, and you're now just at a certain level. This dose of responsiveness is an important issue for further study because the exact plot of gain with training could have important critical implications for those interested in fluid intelligence. Our study also does not permit us to know how long the training gain persists. Longitudinal studies will be required to address that issue. These limitations notwithstanding, our findings are of general significance because they provide evidence for enhancement of fluid intelligence by cognitive training different from the training the test itself. The finding that cognitive training can improve fluid intelligence is a landmark result because of this form of intelligence has been claimed to be largely immutable. Instead of regarding fluid intelligence as an immutable trait, our data provide evidence that with the appropriate training, there is potential to improve fluid intelligence. Moreover, we provide evidence that the amount of fluid intelligence gain critically depends on the amount of training time. Really interesting. So, as long as you keep playing it, you will get a result. Considering the fundamental importance of fluid intelligence in everyday life and its predictive power for a large variety of intellectual tasks and professional success, we believe that our findings may be highly relevant to applications in education. Absolutely fascinating, that. Absolutely fascinating. And so this is what they discovered in 2008. This is what led to them creating the dual and back game, which has just made a difference to so many people, and just goes to show, like, it doesn't matter whether you are clever, whether you are dumb, whether you have high IQ, low IQ, this game is universal. It is for everyone. And basically, the people who get the best results from it are those who play it for a consistent amount of time and try and maximize the amount of rounds that they can do on a regular basis. And as long as you are consistent with that, you should see dramatic improvements with your overall well-being, your anxiety, and your working memory and fluid intelligence and short-term memory. So really, really interesting study that. Absolutely fascinating what they discovered there, and gives me a bit more insight into again, that, you know, no matter who you are, you can certainly improve, and that everyone gets to essentially that same sort of plateau. And I guess actually that's where then there are these other variations of factors that you can then tweak on the game to really up that challenge even more, such as maybe speeding, you know, the rate that the square appears, or changing the color, changing the letters and stuff as well. So absolutely fascinating with that. So I'll go back onto the website. Let's carry on reading through this. I know that was kind of a digression, but I've never really sort of like sat and actually understood what the study was. Again, I was just kind of given the game, and told, right, this is great, do it, but didn't really understand, like, what was the experiment for, what were they trying to discover with it, and then what did they discover with it by doing all these experiments with different groups and who had different backgrounds, different IQs and stuff, and then what was the outcome from that. So really, really interesting. Now there are things here about with what is working memory. So there's kind of a big thing here about it, and this is on Wikipedia, which there's a lot of information here. I won't go through that, but by all means, definitely have a read if you want to see what like the definition is of working memory, and also the definition of fluid intelligence. Brain Workshop implements this dual and back task and allows you to attempt to improve your own working memory and fluid intelligence. The dual and back task involves remembering a sequence of spoken letters and sequence of positions of a square at the same time, and identifying when a letter or a position matches the one that appeared earlier. Brain Workshop can closely replicate the conditions of the original study. In addition, it also includes optional extended game modes such as a triple N-back and arithmetic N-back for an extra challenge. It also includes features such as statistics, tracking, graphs, and configurability. Anecdotal evidence from users suggests that the dual and back task can also enhance focus and attention and may help improve the symptoms of ADHD and ADD. So if you do have attention deficit disorder, why not give this a go? In fact, it'd be really fascinating if there are any viewers who do have ADD, who are looking for something to help with their focus and attention as well as their memory. I'd love to actually hear how this game works for you, but there's at least a brief explanation there of what the game is and how it works. The rest of the information here is just sort of like what devices it works on, and then it's been downloaded over 775,000 times, which is phenomenal. Well, that'd be amazing if actually part of that was because of me telling people to download it. That'd be amazing, but I wouldn't have anywhere close to that. So you've also got the dual and back community here. So if maybe you want to hear about other strategies that other people have, maybe they might be the same as mine, maybe they might not be, I do not know. But that's also a great place for you to speak to other people who have played the brain training game for a very long time, and hear what they're doing, see how far they are. In fact, I'd be quite curious to see or hear, in fact, maybe if I click on the community, someone's IQ increased from 125 to 140. Okay, I can't see anything here to see if anyone said what like their what the highest level is, which would be fascinating. So I suppose there's room for that. Download page, essentially this is just all the different places, all the different software versions to download. So there's no excuse if you've either got a Linux, a Mac, or Windows like with me. But yeah, this is to at least download onto like your laptop or computer. That's probably the easiest thing. Okay, so it's not actually playing a video there, but don't worry, don't fret. I've actually got video tutorials on my YouTube channel to show you how to play the game. So it's a shame that there's not one working here, but because I'd be interested to see their version. Now they've actually got like a walkthrough thing here on how to play the game, which I won't read through in case this like contradicts in any way like the strategy that I apply, but by all means do maybe give this a particular read. But what does this say? It says dual and back exercise featured in Brain Workshop was the subject of an April 2008 peer-reviewed scientific study, which we read through, which shows that practicing the dual and back task for 20 minutes 4 to 5 times per week will improve your working memory, short-term memory, and fluid intelligence. This Wired article has a good summary of its benefits. If you've never tried dual and back before, here's a quick tutorial. So we won't go through the tutorial bit, but I will click on this Wired article, which is apparently missing. So that is a shame. But there are plenty of websites anyway online that do say the benefits, and I've listed it a number of times in every video that I've done about the brain training game. But this is cool that they have actually got some visual examples here about like if you see the square appearing in the same position, then it's a match. It's a match. So that is really cool. Okay, no, that is great. But all right, this bit looks okay. This looks interesting. What's the best way to benefit from Brain Workshop? The original study on dual and back shows a linear correlation between the participants' gain in measured fluid intelligence and time spent practicing dual and back. In other words, the more you practice, the more the potential benefit. Aim for 20 sessions per day, about 25 minutes. I'd probably argue it's actually longer than that. I think it takes me about 45 minutes. But I am aware that the higher difficulties, they do take longer, the rounds, because there's now more in the sequence that's added. So like, for example, on dual 3 back, there might be 30 sequences. So like the blue square appears in 30 places and letters are said 30 times simultaneously. And then on like level 5, there might be like 45 times that the blue squares appears, and 45 times that a letter is said. So, you've got more to remember in the sequence or through the rounds as you're playing. So it does add on more time, especially if each new square or letter adds another 3 seconds on. So suddenly what might be a minute a level or a minute a round might now take nearly 2 minutes around. So it's just something to consider that I do think they're probably incorrect with that. But interesting though that they suggest 20 sessions per day, which I can agree. If you can really push yourself with that, at minimum, I would definitely be saying 10. The sessions today indicator in the top right corner of the brain training workshop represents a convenient way to keep track of your 20 session goal. Well, if I actually just open the brain workshop, it's just suggesting up here, so you can just see how much time it took, how many sessions you've done, especially also in the last sort of 24 hours. Usually on average, I'm sure for me, it kind of visually says it's sort of between like 25 minutes to 45 minutes, where depending on how I'm fluctuating between the levels back. Intensive training every day might not be optimal because the brain needs time to learn, adapt, and reconfigure itself. So it's a bit like where I mentioned about with like the gym example, like, you push yourself and then the next day you're going to be slightly fatigued. So you're not going to be able to push yourself as far as you did the day before. Your brain's just not going to be able to handle that. You need at least a little bit of rest time, or you're going to be doing you're going to have a weaker day. So intensive training every day might not be optimal because the brain needs time to learn, adapt, and reconfigure itself. A training schedule of 4 to 5 days per week seem to be the most efficient. The hardest part might be maintaining your training schedule over time. Try pairing up with someone else who's interested in increasing their intelligence. So basically play with a friend if you want, which I don't. Contact each other to ensure you're both maintaining your schedules. But in a way, this is kind of like why when I'm working with clients and I get them to do the brain training game, part of what I suggest to them to do is to let me know that they've done their daily game by getting them to take a screenshot and then send it to me so I can see what the results are. So having some accountability is really good if you're finding that you just don't trust yourself when you're playing the game. As mentioned previously, learning and practicing dual and back tasks at the limit of your ability is what increases your fluid intelligence. Push your limits every day and try to reach the highest end back level possible. The following health tips will help you maintain optimal mental performance and overall well-being. Number 1, eat a balanced diet with plenty of nutrient-rich greens and other whole, unrefined foods. Get plenty of sleep. Sufficient high-quality sleep is essential to the learning process and will aid you on your body's regenerative systems, as well as improving mood and focus. Number 3, regular aerobic exercise, interesting, has been shown to improve blood flow to the brain and stimulate neurogrowth in the hippocampus, a brain structure vital to the formation of long-term memories. Okay, interesting. Really interesting. So this might be where it might be worth taking up yoga classes. Number 4, reduce stress in your life. Chronic stress causes elevated levels of stress hormone cortisol, which has many negative effects. And number 5, along with dual and back, engage in a variety of mentally stimulating activities. So that might be speaking to people, socializing, or even probably playing on a computer game as well, believe it or not. So really fascinating. In fact, actually, it's quite cool that they've given other things to help contribute to the improvement of your brain capacity and overall thinking, and saying that although the brain training game is great, you've got to give it some nourishment to really help it thrive and really help it develop. So that's really, really cool. Let's go on the next page. So configuration files. Okay, this is just if we're editing stuff, which we're not going to do. There's a slight explanation here on like the increase and decrease of the level system. So Brain Workshop uses an adaptive level changing model, which will increase or decrease your end-back level depending on your performance. A score of 80% or greater moves you up. Between 50% to 79% means you just stay on the same level, which comes out as like gray in the numbers. And 3 scores below 50%, you go down a level. So basically, if you fail 3 times, or if you get under 50% 3 times, you get moved down a level. So if you're on level 4, you then go to level 3. So yeah, so that's really cool. Manual mode, what's this? Is ideal for experimenting with non-default session parameters. So we got manual mode here. What's this? Manual mode is ideal for experimenting with non-default session parameters. Okay, now, so I actually find I don't feel the need in changing any settings on the game. I think unless you're starting to maybe get to like Duel and Back 7 or 8, and you're really struggling with that, then maybe it's worth starting to tweak stuff on like the lower levels to really improve the difficulty. But personally, I wouldn't really be changing any of these other things. And then, yeah, there is a graph so you can see how your overall improvement is doing. And in fact, if I even click on mine, you can see just how I fluctuate and where I've had these like stupidly bad dips. I've only had that because of where I made the tutorial videos and I had to purposely like push it down to level 1 again. Hence why it's such a low dramatic average during those moments. But otherwise, yeah, you can kind of see it's pretty level. I'm kind of between like 6 and 4 constantly, which is really good. But then I'm kind of doing about 10 rounds. I'm not doing 20 rounds. And perhaps if I did push maybe to 20 rounds, maybe that might give me the overall improvement that I need to actually get me up to level 6, which I've only done once. And it was very difficult. I failed 3 times and I was straight back down to level 5 again very quickly. We've then got configuration options, which, yeah, I don't really want to play around with. Okay, interesting that, yeah, you got, it says here the kind of letters and stuff that said, and that you can change these as well. So again, if you want to play around with the difficulty, which I don't like doing, I've already find the game difficult enough, as I'm sure you probably do as well. So I wouldn't be worrying about changing it to like what numbers, NATO phonetic alphabet, Alpha Bravo. Oh god, yeah, that'd be very difficult. Piano notes, okay, Morse code. I don't know what that would look like. Additional game modes. Yeah, I mean, even for me, even after all these years, I mean, these other difficulties just don't fascinate me. They might be kind of fun to have a go at and play, but in a way, I kind of think like, why reinvent the wheel? Why, if I'm finding the original Duel and Back game to be a real challenge and I'm getting the benefits of it, why make life even difficult for myself? Why try other things which I'm then starting from scratch again? Yes, there'll be a challenge there. Yes, there'll absolutely be an improvement, but yeah, I just don't see the need in it. I think the original game is really good. I mean, there's a lot here. There's at least 8 games here to play on, which is good. Yeah, it looks like nothing to really worry about there. If I just click donate. Okay, and they've got donations disabled, which is unfortunate. Otherwise, I'd be saying that if you do get benefits out of the game, absolutely, send them some money. I'm sure they'd appreciate it. But this was the exploration of the website and into the actual research done for the Duel and Back game. So I've genuinely found this quite fascinating to learn more about the background of the game and why it's so good. And it's even got me thinking that if I really want to try and get myself back to level 6, maybe I should be doing more rounds in a day. Maybe I should also be stricter for myself on me actually playing the game, because I find I've got this love-hate relationship with it, which I may have mentioned earlier. I'll play it for a little bit, and then I have a long break from it, and then I sort of complain, oh, I want to be playing it again. So, it's interesting if you can hold yourself accountable, you can have the accountability with someone else, but ultimately it is your responsibility. And for me, this is my responsibility to play this game. And I kind of feel like now that I've got this kind of like slight inspiration or second wind to try and do more levels with this. So I do hope that you found this as fascinating as I did. I'm glad I've got a clearer understanding of the game. I'm glad it's re-inspired me to play it and certainly to advise other people with it. If you found this video useful, and I will give certainly the Brain Workshop credit for their website, and also if you want to check out the other articles, you can check them out by clicking the links on the Brain Workshop website, which if I go back to it, so there's links to Wikipedia, and then it's on the PNAS, which sounds almost really naughty, PNAS website, and you can actually read the experiment yourself, and also just a little bit more here, which I didn't read, about the materials and stuff, which may have been really useful and important, maybe not, I don't know, but I think just to have insight into the actual overall experiment, I think was incredibly beneficial, and I really enjoyed it. So we'll leave it there because this was an incredibly long video. Like the video if you can, subscribe to the channel. Good luck with playing the brain training game. If you haven't got it already, download it from this website and give it a go. And let me know how you get on in either this video, in other videos. And if you get stuck, I've got tutorial videos on my channel. There's me talking for a long time. Check out those tutorials if you are struggling with playing the game, or you want to get an idea of how to strategize before you start playing it. Give them a watch. But other than that, thank you very much for watching, and then we're going to have some lunch now.